Greetings, it is I, Tantus Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome to the world of Vampire the Masquerade. Of course, we are returning to this world once more. And from all my series that I've done on various individuals to major factions like tribes and bloodlines, one of the things I haven't actually covered are the actual major factions, of which there are technically 3 that we'd really want to talk about, or if there's another one to talk about, the Camarilla, the Black Hand. We could always talk about that one, but for now we want to start with the one that is the base one, and that's what today is. The Camarilla, which I might be butchering the name. I will continually say in every one of these episodes I have, I don't pronounce anything or say anything correctly, so please take my pronunciation with a grain of salt. I am bad at that sort of thing. But the Camarilla is one of the premier vampire organizations. So talking about it, letting you know what there is about it, is going to be great. So pardon if there's any other kind of like background noise. I might turn on a fan today. If that background noise comes up, that's because it's hot. We had a heat spike yesterday, and the heat hasn't dissipated from the house. You know, I think that's about it for introductions to stuff. Are we ready to dive in? Sure. I think we're ready to dive in, and I think I'll throw myself over here, as I always do. And let's start by talking about the source material now. Now, I'm using one book in particular, but there are 2 books that if you want to look into about this material, I would recommend checking them out, as they are the major source of a bunch of information, and they have a lot of information on the 5th edition stuff. We'll start out with the Camarilla book, which is the 5th edition Camarilla book. There's also the Chicago by Night. I'm going to do this one. It's larger. There you go. And the one that I primarily used along with the Wikipedia page is the Guide to Camarilla. This is the one that I have. I don't have those other 2 books. I don't have a lot of 5th edition books. So, you know. But if you're looking into this information and you're looking, if you want to use 5th edition, which, you know, I've always said is up to you what your primary focus is for your type of vampire game. There's certainly vampire games that 5th edition work better than others. That's it. Alright. So, Camarilla. Here is their symbol. Let's talk about them. Let's go over some basics of this organization. Of course, the idea is that not everyone is a version of, and this is the 5th edition version of that, is a member of a sect. But these sects that exist are ways that vampires divide amongst themselves, and the big part of Vampire the Masquerade, the politics of it, come about. The Camarilla is the most organized of all the various sects that there are. They favor tradition. Controlling mortals behind the scene are very important aspects to them, and they have 6 major traditions that they follow. That is basically the way that they control things. The Masquerade being the most fundamental. I will talk about these traditions as it is an important part of the Camarilla, but we'll set that aside for a second. So, there are individuals of any clan that can be a member of the Camarilla. That's an important part about it. Though there is only certain clans which make up the core membership. So it doesn't matter what clan I'm a member of, I could be Camarilla. It's just that, you know, certain clans, their core of that clan is a member of this. There was a time that all kindred who obeyed their laws were welcome, but membership exclusivity and control is something that has happened over more of the recent years. And anarchs, caitiff, and thin-blooded vampires are not allowed, because those are kind of signs of negative things. If you're looking towards 5th edition, things have been tightening even more because of the bunch of mortals who now know about vampires from the Second Inquisition, which I have my huge complaints about, I've talked about in other videos, but regardless, your use of it and that understanding of it, it makes sense that things have buckled down a little bit more in this organization. It arose during the Dark Ages, so there's a lot of traditions and structure in this that mimic the Dark Ages, of course, because of the history of it. And the major groups that are at odds with it are, of course, the Sabbat, and more recently, again, if you're using 5th edition, is the Anarchs. They've kind of gone against those a little bit more. Anyway, so let's talk about the history of the Camarilla, because that's probably a really great start to talk about this, to understand it all. Whoops. Alright, lost my place there for a second. So, the original Inquisition and the Anarch Revolt were things that were happening in earlier days of Europe. And these two things combined basically drove a lot of Cainites, vampires, together to form some kind of alignments. And a bunch of elders met together to discuss this. This early league of vampire power came about around 1394. And, of course, not a lot came of it, because, again, this is the earlier days. Elders and clans were always against each other, at odds with each other. And, you know, it wasn't until there was a powerful attack by the Anarch Tyler against the Ventru Elder Hardestant that led to something more coming about. That attack drove these vampires to show that they were always seeing there was a threat, but the elders were, like, passing it off as it was a minor threat. This made it more of a major threat. And so they came together and began to think about having some kind of grouping, some kind of united front. And so they brought together the elders that would found the Camarilla, grabbed their most trusted childer and servants together, and basically it was a united front against the Anarchs at the time here. And this new resolve, this new way of doing, created this new alliance. Basically, once the Anarchs, they were a problem. The Anarch Revolt and its entire thing against the Elders, which would evolve into the Anarchs as we know more nowadays, kind of brought about this need. When they proved themselves actually dangerous is when these vampires said, oh wait, shit, we got to do something about that. So the Camarilla as a foundation wasn't primarily announced until 1435. And at this point in time that these founders rallied together basically any vampire that wasn't part of the roving Anarchs together with this. There was also the Assamite who had been kind of separated out in the Middle East that were beginning their invasions of Europe, and mortal mobs for the actual Inquisition going on, being a very big danger. So these things kind of combining together were what rallied a lot of membership under her. The word Camarilla comes from Spanish, meaning to mutually scratch another's back. So that was kind of the idea about it. Working together throughout it. Basically, working together, kind of scratch each other's backs, kind of make sure that it goes on. So the founders continued their battle against the Anarchs of the time. They became the first Justicars, which we'll talk about the various ranks of the Camarilla in a minute, and basically fought to keep the sect together. 1486 was when the first conclave, where the Justicars were given abilities to punish vampires, to violate traditions, where the group basically found its footing. New agencies were formed that reported to the Justicars, and the sect basically got its influence. The Archon position was created. And then in 1493 was the Convention of Thorns. The Convention of Thorns was a peace agreement between the Camarilla, the Anarchs, and the Assamite clan. So, remember, I mentioned Anarchs were an ally for quite a while. It was 1493 that this was the first actual end of... This is the end of the first Anarch revolt, basically. These conflict between these three groups was reached. So, there's more details to it, and you could look into the Convention of Thorns, but the idea is that it took a number of days. These groups worked it out and hashed out a general peace at the time. And this peace, though, did lead to the true birth of what is today the Camarilla. Like, this early group was just a version of it, but marking down this peace and basically drawing it out cemented themselves as a major organization. The traditions became law, and the major representatives for the clans that founded it, the Bruja, the Gangrel, the Malkavians, Nosferatu, Toreador, Tremere, and Ventru, were the sects of the clan. So we have these 7 clans being the core of what would be the Camarilla. The Lasombra, the Semiche, and the Anarchs kind of went and formed the Sabbat, which kind of opposed that. Of course, this version of Anarchs did. More Anarchs, of course, eventually became the new Anarchs we have today. There's been multiple groups of Anarchs. That's an entirely different thing to talk about. So, the Convention of Thorns, it was a big victory for the Camarilla, and basically this formation of this led to the formation of the Sabbat, which led to this conflict between the two sects, which lasted for about 5 centuries. Before we talk about more of that and what's going on during that time leading into the time period known as the Final Nights, let's talk about the traditions, because that's a very important part of this. It's the basically legal backbone of Camarilla society, and the prince fulfills the elder role outlined in the tradition in most modern knights, basically whoever controls the city. It's a lot of the culture of vampires springs from this, and kind of gives the idea of it. So the first tradition is the Masquerade. It says, "Thou shalt not reveal thy nature to those not of the blood." Basically, don't reveal yourself. Keep yourself hidden. The second tradition is domain. "Thine domain is thine own concern." I'll say it kind of like this, because it kind of sounds silly. And I like the way that I can say that very silly, because these are incredibly kind of silly. So basically, wherever you control is your own domain, others will respect you while you're in your own domain. And none may challenge your word while they're in your domain. The third tradition of progeny. "Thou shalt only sire another in the permission of thine elder. If thou createst another without thine elder's leave, both thou and thine progeny shall be slain." So basically, in this case, go to your prince and ask to be able to create another vampire within their territory. Fourth tradition, the accounting. "Those thou create are thine own children. Until thine progeny shall be released, thou shalt command them in all things. Their sins are thine to endure." Basically, until whoever you created is good to go and join vampire society, you're responsible for them, and if they fuck up, you fuck up too. Fifth tradition is hospitality. "Honor one another's domain. When thou comest to a foreign city, thou shalt present thyself to the one who ruleth there. Without the word of acceptance, thou art nothing." Go talk to the prince when you visit another city or another domain. Whoever's in charge of it, go visit them and be like, "Hey, yo, nice to meet you. I'm visiting your city." It's basically be polite to other vampires that you visit. And the sixth tradition, the destruction. "Thou art forbidden to destroy another of thy kind. The right destruction belongs only to thine elder. only the eldest amongst these shall call the Blood Hunt. So, that's basically don't kill each other, and only an elder can call the Blood Hunt, which is a tradition of the destruction, which we could talk about the Blood Hunt for a second. It's basically destruction of another vampire. It's a wild hunt when given by a Sabbat, but it's basically legalized murder, kinslaying, serious offenses, diablerie, breaching the Masquerade, invasion of domain, other very severity defenses, repeated offenses could result in the prince to deem someone worthy of a blood hunt, and a blood hunt calls upon the entire city, entire group there, to murder someone. A good example of me using a blood hunt is, if you ever checked out my Legacies of Caine series, which is concluded now, one of the characters, my good old gangrel member, whose name eludes me right now, played by Worm, there was a blood hunt for him in Chicago. Granted, it wasn't a major hunt, but, you know, he eventually got that taken care of and could go back to Chicago if he really wanted to, but it was there. But you can see that that is these set of traditions are very loose. There isn't a lot to them. It's basic rules that aren't really difficult to necessarily follow, but do define the Camarilla in quite a way. These basic rules. So, post the Convention of Forms, basically the Camarilla's power was secured. It took 2 centuries of kind of building things together, organizing, kind of putting together these kind of smaller sects within them and organizing things in this kind of like hierarchy. It was around the 17th century that the younger Sabbat began heading to the New World. Most of Europe was left to the Camarilla. There was a debate whether to pursue to America or not. The idea then became stake out some new territory. Basically, there are still younger kindred within the Camarilla, and certainly with a lot of the elders and a lot more power bases within there, they couldn't find places for themselves. So, this new world, yes, we might have more conflict with the Sabbat, which if we just let them go, we wouldn't. But by going there also, you know, we can continue a conflict with our enemy that's our enemy anyway, and hey, we can placate our younger vampires to, like, look, new place you can check out. Go head over there. Yeah. So there was conflict going on there. The various Dutch, English, and French colonies were great places for vampires to head out. There was a loss between the Camarilla and the Sabbat in the East Coast during the War of 1812. In the 19th century, basically the Camarilla was only hold onto territory within the New World because the Sabbat fought between themselves, and there was civil wars in the Sabbat. The Sabbat was just a much more powerful force in the New World. They were much more well established. So as the Camarilla came in and grabbed territory, they were fought back and kind of crushed from there. And it was the 20th century that the Camarilla became weakened because of their own internal disputes with different sides over the conflicts in Europe, basically the 2 World War. It was Second World War when a lot of elders, especially amongst the Toreador, Tremere, and Ventrue, supported the Axis powers. The Inner Circle itself refused to take sides, but individual Justicars ended up working against each other because there were some that supported either side of this conflict. When the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the importance of preserving the Masquerade and global peace for mortals became a very important thing, because the idea is that the mortals just destroy themselves. Well, the vampires don't have anything. So this kind of reunified the Camarilla. So it's sort of like the mimic of human political conflict mimicked vampire conflict with these Camarilla, because the Camarilla is European-based. we get into the final nights, which is the 90s and beyond, which the first major event is, of course, the Sabbat invades the East Coast. There's another big blow to the Camarilla, is the departure of the Gangrel. Whatever reasons unknown, I kind of hit upon them, but Justicar Xavier went before the Inner Circle, basically said a single sentence and left. And over the course of a month, not all of it, but the majority of the Gangrel left and became independent. They just left. Earl Shulgi rose from Topor, which led to another event, which basically cleansed a lot of the Assamites who did not follow the path of blood. Those that survived attempt to join the Camarilla. That was all pretty much all of the Banu Hakim. They were led by Al-Astrad and Tirgirius. So that became one of the group. I've talked about the Assamites and their various factions in one of my clan or bloodline videos. So if you want to learn all about their history and stuff, I did talk about this big uprising that one of their major elders kind of showed up and didn't take kindly to what was going on and just purged a lot of shit. And so those that didn't want to go with the purge basically split the clan, and that clan half went and joined the thing. So that's the Assamite Schism. I've talked about that before. If you want to check out, I recommend checking out my Assamite video. So, 5th edition. So, the beckoning was something that occurred within here. It was basically kindred of generation 9th or lower compelled to head to the Middle East. This was during the same time as Sabbat's Gehenna Crusades. A few elders that avoided it had kind of holed up in their domains, and the antediluvians, Methuselah's regions, thought it was like a psychological, like old blood bond. And, you know, the versions of this and the reason behind it, you know, there's a lot of stuff that, like, there was this beckoning that occurred, and then the Second Inquisition basically caused a lot of damage to the Camarilla, and the paranoia of leaders against modern technology because of things like the Second Inquisition. Anarchs were blamed. There was a much more split between them. That's why Anarchs aren't an ally anymore, because they rely on modern technology a lot more. There was a lot more elitisms. Things changed. There was the Conclave of Prague, where Theo Bell slays Hardestant, and the bulk of the Bruja clan joined the Gangrel, and they both are now part of the anarchist movement, and basically make the anarchist movement, rather than a lot of just members from a bunch of clans that work together, an actual major faction a lot more. Then we now have the Banu Hakim with the Camarilla, half of the Sombra, basically, and all of their clan leadership begin on a city-by-city basis to basically stake a bunch of Sabbat vampires or more arcane prices and join the Camarilla. So Chicago falls this way. Basically, a major thing happens within the Sabbat that a bunch of the current leadership in the time and about half of the major of the clan. So again, a clan's leadership leaving doesn't mean that the clan doesn't have strength. It just means it's a lot of their more powerful members, a lot of the people that have influence. It meant that La Sombra, as a clan, basically just fractured their power basis within Sabbat, damaging the Sabbat, and leaving. Leading to what is the current members in what would be the 5th edition time period. The Banu Hakim, that part of the Assamite era, the Sombra, Malkavi, Nosferatu, Toreador, Tremere, and Ventru. Again, you could still be a Bruja or Gangrel that's a member of the Camarilla, especially if you had been there before, but the connection there is weakened. There might be some suspect of you. You might have to do some things to, like, kind of prove yourself, and it might be that, you know, you just never left. Newer members, definitely that's a thing. Remember, exclusive club. And there, you could have been from a clan that was there from the entire time. You could have been the Sombra that was like, welcome back, brothers! I've been here the entire time because I was saying whatever you were doing, stupid! Guess what? You were right! Or even some other groups there, too. That's basically Camarilla history in a nutshell. And that Conclave of Prague in 2012 was a major event. Yeah. So, it's definitely another major historical event. So, let's talk a little bit more about Camarilla culture, because that's important. As I said, the traditions are a major part of this entire thing. It's a code of conduct for not only your own area you control, but things like making more vampires, controlling more empires, respect to those that are in charge of you, and of course, kind of hiding out things. The idea of these traditions does create some resentment towards, younger kindred or anarchs, especially because it's very your controller, your elder. I'm turning on my fan now, so part of that background noise, for a little bit at least. It's respecting your elders, and honestly, there are plenty of younger vampires that might see that respecting your elder, have they earned that? This is a very older vampire-centric idea of things. An important part of this entire process, though, is, of course, humanity. The path of humanity is basically the path of Camarilla members. The idea being that there are billions of mortals, they have incredibly powerful weapons, and, even with the most powerful disciplines, they could still destroy kindred society if their existence is revealed. So, you don't want the mortal population to be very harmed. You want to protect them, protect the Masquerade, goodwill towards humanity. Basically, the idea of the human path is to blend in with humanity. To blend in with mortals, to maintain civility, composure, and one's human characteristics, so humans just recognize you as human. And that's the path of humanity. The path of enlightenment, the path of the Sabbat, is one that's basically just... the path of enlightenment is basically discouraged. It's a code of morality, another one. The Sabbat has some of it, but it's not the only one. There's other paths that are out there. And it's discouraged, and some elders practice it. So there are other paths that are within the Camarilla, but really the path of humanity is the main one. It's kind of called a path. It's the basic score on most sheets. But you also have to recognize that, especially if you're things like Sabbat, there is no one unifying path in the Sabbat or some of the other organizations. They all have their own ones. So, a good thing about the Camarilla to talk about, too, and this is a very important thing to talk about, is when the Camarilla was formed, when it was created, most of the vampires that were alive during that time knew the Antediluvians when they were in active power. So these stories were there. They had stories of Caine and the creation of the vampires and the myths of it. And so these people that came into what would form the Camarilla and the modern Knights have this connection. These leaders have a connection to the stories that happen. So, because this connection, the idea of Gehenna, it's discouraged, not punished, so that those that want to follow it, too. Gehenna cults aren't... It's discouraged again for that one. So if you join a Gehenna cult, it's okay. And, there's this worry during Final Nights. I guess the Camarilla's stance on Gehenna, on the Antediluvians and stuff like that, and because, again, a lot of the elders that formed the Camarilla talked or knew the Antediluvians, it's one of the reasons that they had a very hard stance with the Sabbat, because the Sabbat is very anti-Elders, anti-Diluvians, and kind of stuff like that. Anti-Old Guard. I'll talk about that. So this kind of primary philosophy actually becomes one of the main points as to why there is this major schism between these two. When you get to 5th edition, more vampires of mortal religions become a major thing that they talk about. It was always a thing that exists, but because of a lot of the schisms within a lot of groups and a lot of the upheaval that the modern world has created, it's certainly with a lot more modern vampires, the idea that there is this more connection to that. And there are some evolving forms of worship too. Arcane cults, ancestor worship, and things like that become much more of a major thing. So there is this more schisms happening in a lot of beliefs. And especially because of some of those elders that founded the group that talked about this stuff, gone off on their little thing. So, prestation is one of the major things within the Camarilla. What is this? This is where you are trading, repaying, or incurring favors amongst vampires. That's the basic way, is the, hey, remember I talked about the I scratch your back, you scratch mine? Well, that's the core of the Camarilla system in a way. It is the way that they've managed to maintain themselves in a lot of ways amongst the various domains and controls and those that, like princes that control domains that might have multiple factions under them and stuff like that. And certainly the Sabbat or independent clans don't really have to follow this kind of system of that. But there is this level of, you know, following it still means it's a civility in a way. Certainly, yes, the Camarilla is where it's mostly practiced. But I could deal with a non-factioned clan or bloodline, and if I do a trade like this, I scratch their back, they scratch mine, I might be willing more to deal with them and work along with them in this way. It's just the sheer fact that the concept of it, this boons, favors, pledges, and kind of stuff like that being a currency. And this works a lot in the mortal world, you have to remember. You know, a lot of us are like, oh, you help me out, I'll help you out. And, you know, that idealism helps a lot. So, there is also one more thing to talk about, the Red List. Basically, it's a list of vampires, kindred, who the Camarilla most ardently desires to see purged from the face of the earth, the anathema. They're under continual blood hunt. Destruction of these things is just a major thing. The first Red List, the history of it kind of is from the 19th century. The first Red List came about during the 1994, where 13 were put on this list of basically the most wanted, from various different clans who were wanted for various different crimes and added on there at various different times. There are those that are former anathema, and V20 has its own red list that you can check out too. They really haven't, I don't think, updated it for the 5th edition, so if you just want to see these, regardless of whether they're majorly hunted now with everything that's happening, these are members who are basically dangerous, at least in the eyes of the Camarilla. They're specialized archons called Alisters, who basically hunt these folks or anybody associated with them. They have been charged with basically going after the Red List and taking care of them. And it's, as much as the Red List is the target of a destruction by the entire Camarilla sect, these are the enforcers of it, the Alisters. They're basically a secret police that move within that. They work directly under the Inner Circle's command. Remember, I've talked about the Inner Circle, though, but I'll kind of focus it on. I'll have to focus this on a little bit when I focus on the organization of the Camarilla and their various groups, but they are from the Archons. They're basically massive hunters, so they're powerful members that just go after these. And there are a few known ones. So yeah. Let's talk about the organization of the Camarilla. Because the Camarilla has very power bases in North America and Europe. It has kind of a central authority. It doesn't really have a central authority like we think about. It's basically more of a loose alliance, the Camarilla. There really is sort of a central power, but not really there. It doesn't really have a military, but it does have some power bases. Each city is ruled by a prince, assisted by a primogen. A prince is a vampire who controls a large domain, usually a single city. They're associated with elders in the tradition. They usually have a quorum of senators who follow under them. Basically, they're advisors who are from the domain they have, that represent maybe the different factions within the domain, who give them information. A primogen is a representative, which can be part of their part of their synonyms could be members of the primogen. The primogen are members of the clans who are under the prince of that city. Basically, there's the idea that the Senate advises the prince. A senator could be a primogen. A primogen doesn't need to be a senator. But whatever clans are within a city, and especially if there are civil terms with the rulership of the city, the prince of the city and their power base, they have a primogen, basically a member representative, that if something is happening with their clan, this is the person representing their clan. So if you are the Ventru primogen could be the prince. But if the prince is, let's say, a Toreador, the Ventru primogen is going to talk with them. They might want to be a member of the Senate, they might not be. Certainly some group like the Tremere, they could have a representative of them, the primogen of the Tremere in the city. They don't need to be a member of the Senate. So you can see how, like, there is these levels of control and grouping. And again, like, a primogen is kind of voted or selected from in the clan. There could be things like orders from higher up in the clan, voting, violence. Depending on the clan, depends on how the primogen is sort of selected amongst them to do that. So yeah. So, yes, we have our primogen, our council of there. We have our Senate, which are the advisors directly to the prince, which can be made up of some primogen or other members. There are some other offices, 3 more, that are given by the prince of the city. The Scourge, the Sheriff, and the Keeper of Elysium. The Scourge is basically kind of like a muscle for the prince. The thing about the Scourge is it's primarily responsible for getting rid of 14th or higher generations, or those that are legally embraced. The Scourge doesn't have pretense of investigations. They just go out and they hunt people that are guilty by nature of your existence. That's what a Scourge does. So, you're not like a law keeper, you're an enforcer. The Sheriff, on the other hand, does do a lot of things similar to that. They do some stuff like that. They are another hand of the prince, but they are basically more law enforcement of a master of arms that can be thuggish or brutish. They have hounds to assist them. They are more investigator, though, too. They're still an enforcer. They'll still do violence and kill off other vampires at the prince's, behest. But they do investigations, too. They look into things. They question things. They find information out and report it to the prince and their findings to the prince. And, so that's the idea, that they have this other level of more ability. And the last one is the Keeper of Elysium. Elysium is a neutral ground in a Camarilla city that there's supposed to be no conflict between any vampire cities. It's usually chosen by the prince, artistic or intellectual worth, something like a theater, a museum. There could be even those sometimes nightclubs, a kindred's haven, if it's an important member of the society there. Regardless, there shouldn't be any violence there. Keep your temper in check. And a Keeper of Elysium, or a sheriff, basically, is put there to control it. The Keeper of Elysium is basically a special title that is just someone that caretakes over an area of Elysium. That person then can schedule, cancel events, have some scrutiny over what's going on there. But that's the idea of one of the main power sides of the Camarilla, is the princes and their domains, the individuals. They have a major amount of political power on the majority of scale there. So that's the thing is, we've already kind of broken down a lot of the power structure, and it's very individual city-based. It really is. So the thing is, though, this prince interfaces with the overall government of the Camarilla. They exist the Archons and the Justicars, which are kind of the next level up after that. Who are these? Well, let's talk about the Justicars and the Archons. The Justicars are the most visible component of the Camarilla's government. They're charged with educating matters of the tradition on a wider scale. They're the eyes, ears, and hands of the inner circle, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's one Justicar for each clan of the Camarilla. So normally there's 7 of these. There was 7 in the original founding. There's 7 technically now. Each is handpicked by several Archons who act as their spies, enforcers, and representatives. Or each is served by several handpicked Archons, representative of the world. So each Justicar has Archons. I'll talk about that in a second. So these are the face of the Camarilla. They're kind of the power basis, but again, the inner circle really is the power basis. I'll talk about that in a second. There were the Justicars have shifted here and there. There was a 2011 elected, though the Bourgeois and Gangrel clan did technically lose their seats there, but then the 2 new groups of kind of getting in there. So there is an appointed Justicar list from all the ones that are currently in the group. So, and there is, you can look into the Justicars over time too. Archons, let's talk about those. They're agents of Justicars before we talk about the inner circle. We're keeping that for last. They're basically referred to as the fingers of the Justicars. Effectively, they're representatives of each of the Justicars. They might have combat power, tactical power, investigation power, espionage abilities. They're chosen for various abilities like that. Do I need someone that's going to be my strong arm? Do I need someone that's going to organize things for me? Someone that's going to look into stuff for me? Or someone that's going to be my spy? They're basically, they're chosen amongst the ranks of the other major vampires. Or the Servi, which are the, basically, aides to the Archons. So basically, from in amongst the clans, aides, a new Justicar, or new Archon is selected by a Justicar, basically put around it. And remember, Justicars change, so a Justicar might choose from amongst the current groups of Servine or other important members as they build themselves up. They might keep the same Archons, they might switch them out. Basically, there are a number of ranks within Archons. Also, we'll talk about those for a second here. The Praetors, they're given authority over their peers. It's basically an assignment with pride. It's basically to give authority over other members of the clan, help give a Justicar's control. The Alistairs are of course, the ones that hunt the Red List. I talked about them as being promoted Archons. Dog catchers, those that go after werewolves. Basically, dog catchers are those that fight werewolves and come out on top. Doppelgangers are deep cover agents, basically spies. The E Division, investigating members of the occult or an unknown phenomena to kindred in general. The Gisayans, they're basically put in charge of uprooting Gehenna cults and investigating Naudists for any Naudist lore, for any evidence that Gehenna may be a real danger. Remember, Gehenna isn't illegal, it's just not supported, so the idea that they basically discourage people from organizing it, and then the Quaestors, which are almost entirely Tremere Archons, are basically sorceress needs of a sect. Again, if a sect has things, they might have different things. Let's talk about the Inner Circle, because that's an important part of this entire thing here. What is the Inner Circle? Well, it's basically shadow government. It's members whose their public face is the Justicars, of course, and their Archon assistants. But Inner Circle members, are kind of secretive. That's the best way to describe it. There are members which are known, and they do have meetings, but the entire idea is that, generally speaking, its identities are kept hidden until, maybe a member of the Inner Circle becomes a Justicar. At this point in time, it would be revealed. And the members of the Inner Circle are those that elect the Justicar. The Inner Circle is a little bit more nebulous, and it is assumed that the most powerful princes in the Camarilla are the members of it, basically. So basically, those that are the most powerful are the Inner Circle. They elect the Justicars, which are their public front. They're really the, power behind the Justicars. The Justicars take care of the everyday stuff. But again, Inner Circle changes who the Justicars are. That's where they come about. A representative of each of the clans that are a member of it. They are elected by the Inner Circle. So you never know if a prince of a city is going to be a member of the Inner Circle. So this is a complex government form, with a shadowy group of very powerful princes electing 7 members from each of the member clans. At this point in time, still 7, and 5th edition is 7 for the original, who then represent the government of the Camarilla as a whole, who select Archons to serve them, and then not only are they serving their needs as a member of their clan, but they're serving their needs as a member of the Inner Circle because they've been elected to represent them. They're people that the Inner Circle felt was appropriate here. Yeah. So, last thing to talk about is a conclave. What is a conclave? It's a big social gathering of Camarilla society. Justicars are those that issue a conclave. It can be used for a trial, if there's a big trial for something that needs to be very public, any kind of announcements, any other kind of specialized reason for it. And it's made to be in a kindred to a certain area. All bloodline, all classes of age can intermingle, voice their opinion. It is meant to be a melting pot of ideas. And it's also everyone that's from the bloodline of Caine are welcome as long as they don't stand in opposition openly to the Camarilla. It's another reason that you could get other individuals, especially if they're seen to work well with the Camarilla, even if they're of a clan that's not normally the Camarilla, could be allowed to show up there. Justicars organize the event. They usually will call upon staff of the local Elysium, including the Keeper of the Elysium, basically if you're holding a conclave in a city, because, hey, I'm going to your city to hold a conclave. Local Elysium, I need your help to organize it. And they're like, I'm ready for the big event. Great. There really isn't a plan. Justicar's kind of put it together. There's, they've slowly evolved, and it kind of came about, and it's basically a political area that they pull together, and certainly they have a reason behind the political thing. There's usually I'm calling a big blood hunt. I'm declaring a war. I'm doing this one. It could be, another one is like prince is politely encouraged to retire. I'm holding on a conclave in your domain. I'm encouraging you to retire, and having a lot of words in this, So, large domains have been reshaped by conclaves. Things have changed a lot by it. There have been some emergencies and troubles that have happened, like local Sabbat kind of causing some issues at a conclave, but generally speaking, they're big hullabaloos that you have, big events that you show up and join. There is also one more thing to mention. There is some divisions between the Camarilla clans, especially in the earlier days. Certainly now things have shaken up. But in the earlier days, there were the clans that were seen as much more high society, Ventrue, Toreador, and Tremere, and those that were more seen as low society, the Bruja, Nosferatu, Malkavians, and Gangrel. It was one of these things that those the first three clans oftentimes held more political power, had more princedoms, general higher ranking amongst clans, more domains, things like that, that the Ventrue, Toreador, and Tremere have always been seen as much more powerful in the Camarilla. Of course, things have shaken up a lot more. The Bruja and Gangrel left. Nosferatu and Malkavians are still there. We have two new clans that are basically members of the Camarilla. The shakeup has occurred, but certainly there's still a lot of power bases that these three clans have more than others when it comes to strength within the Camarilla. They've always been strong there. They're kind of this core aspect of it. Anyway. I forgot to switch images here. I had one more image. It's a little blurry, but I did have one more image here. This one here. It's the largest version of it I can find, unfortunately. Sometimes it's hard to find these nice images from vampire books and stuff you can find online. But no, I think that hits it about it for the Camarilla. So, plenty of members, past and future. With the Banu Hakim joining in 2013, and La Sombra having, according to dates, joined in 2019. The Gangrel leaving 99, Bruja leaving in 2012. The allied ship with the Anarchs from 435 to 2012. Think about that. The Anarchs were always a decent allyship with the Camarilla until they broke that. But now there is a allyship with the Ashira, which is the basically Islamic vampires. I should probably talk about that and the Libans of Africa too. Yeah, there's some more sects I can talk about. The Assyria, the Libans. I forgot those as like sects I could talk about. So there's plenty more sects I can talk about for this kind of series of videos. But yeah, they do have allyship with them starting around 2013 because again, there was a bunch of elders that went that way and ended up in that area and stuff like that because of what I talked about. The Camarilla, regardless of all the changes and regardless of how you look at the lore in Vampire 5th Edition, I always take Vampire 5th Edition lore with a grain of salt. I try to keep the essence of a lot of the history and information that they used, but I try to play it by a little bit better by ear. The idea for me for 5th Edition for its history is they take things to much more of an extreme, but I do like ideas from that shake-up. And the shakes-up within the Camarilla, I find actually interesting. That's one of the things I'm going to say about it. I find the changes that have come about in this more modern age, though I am a big believer in V20 as the system I like how the Camarilla has evolved. And the Camarilla has always been that major organization. Most of the time, most players, Vampire the Masquerade, played Camarilla. Occasionally you had some Anarchs, but Camarilla was really that core of it for many years. Certainly now when we get into V5, when there's a lot more options, when you have a lot more of these groups that you can join in, you have a lot more options. But yes, Camarilla still is that, like, one which you're normally going to do. There's always that one, no matter how a system evolves, how a group of games evolves, that's the core of what your gameplay is. And certainly the traditions are a really easy way to control your players, I'm going to admit. That's why most storytellers use the Camarilla and have the traditions there. It's always been an interesting organization, a complex organization, but a relatively simple one too. I'd recommend definitely, if you're going to be new to it, regardless of the edition you're playing, if you're going V5, if you're going V20, like I kind of also say look into. Both of those are two different, very interesting systems, very good. Again, V5, I have my complaints about it, but I don't think it's a terrible system. I just have my huge complaints about it. And everybody has their preferences. Anyway, go check them out. Look into this stuff. Check out those books if you want to read in more about both the 5th edition version and the older edition version. And, hey, Camarilla is an interesting group. I'd recommend definitely, for storytellers, using that. And for players out there, knowing it, because a lot of storytellers do use it, is a good thing. Because then you know what kind of organization, most of the time, you belong to. Anyway, I think that's it. I could ramble on a little bit more. But my room is hot, and I'm getting kind of hot, and I want to go somewhere and drink some water and relax a little bit. I mentioned that in the beginning. That's why I had the fan on for a large period of time. So, we'll do more of these in the future. If you want to check out more of my content, I have my YouTube and my Twitch. Usually this is live streamed on Twitch, so if you're joining me on Twitch, like Blaze did, hi Blaze! If you're joining me on the YouTube side, hi YouTube! Remember to subscribe to YouTube, follow on Twitch, like the video if you're over on YouTube, or comment. Throw out some shout outs over on the Twitch side if you're joining me there. I will do more vampire content in the future. I do tabletop content live on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday mornings, Tuesday, Thursday in the afternoons. I have another schedule of things like live plays and my tabletop discussion show, which you can check out. I think that's about it for stuff to shout out and stuff. So anyway, all of you out there, I hope you learned a thing or two. And I'm going to say for now, farewell, everybody. Goodbye.